Okay, welcome everyone to the Melbourne EV branch tonight. On those, thanks for coming out on a cold night. On those, the rain, the traffic too was pretty bad tonight, and there's a few here anyway, so thanks for coming along. Tonight, I was going to talk about home solar systems on those with electric vehicles as well, but we'll start off with some EV news first of all. So, in home solar, on those, one of the new developments that's coming through, we've probably seen it for a few years, but it's certainly coming along, is flow batteries. A flow battery is different to the normal round battery and the enclosed batteries that we see that within cars, because with a flow battery, the electricity is actually stored in the liquid, in the electrolyte, and it's pumped in and out of the battery. So it's a different design of battery than what we use with a solid battery, because a flow battery has a couple of tanks and a pump. It works on a different way. But there was a quick video I wanted to show you that explained a bit of what a flow battery is.
Wind turbines and solar panels are great sources of clean energy. But what happens if it's calm or cloudy? Flow batteries store power in liquid tanks. The bigger the tanks, the more energy they can store. Here's how they work. Two solutions, one negative, one positive, are pumped into the battery. The energy source charges the battery, pulling electrons from the positive solution, a process called oxidation, and pushing them into the negative solution, a process called reduction. When the battery turns on, the electron flow reverses and generates an electric current. Using non-toxic organic chemistry, Harvard researchers are building safer, cheaper flow batteries, moving us one step closer to a bright future lit by clean energy.
So the flow battery stores its energy in the liquid rather than in plates and that, like we do with normal batteries and that with metal. And those flow batteries that we had beforehand have had metals in them. They require catalysts to operate properly. They have metallic plates. But they're working on a new design of flow battery, which will change the way the flow batteries work. Instead of storing the energy in a metallic salt or in a metallic ion, the organic flow battery doesn't use metals. It uses organic compounds on those to store the energy in. And so therefore we'll be looking at batteries that don't have lithium or don't have manganese or sodium or some of these metals and that are used within the battery, because it's actually stored in an organic compound. You know, when you look at nature and what nature's done in the body, we store energy with using the glucose reaction to make ATP. And in plants, they also use an organic process, which is photosynthesis, to get the energy from the sun and turn it into starches. But now they're looking at replicating some of those processes within the battery. So we can see the organic flow battery uses organic compounds instead of metals, and it has a much lower material cost. The cost, there's not metals involved in it, and the actual electrolyte cost is a third or a quarter of the cost of what it is for providing with metals. Able to be recharged by changing fluid, recharging in similar time to filling with a petrol station. So if a car had a flow battery in it, on those, the battery would be able to be recharged by changing solution in the battery. So we're almost looking here like a renewable form of petrol. You've got energy stored in the electrolyte of the flow battery, and it can be pumped in and out of the car. And if something like that was used in electric cars, we'd have a much higher efficiency than what you get with petrol cars or gasoline cars, you know, because the motors are only 25% efficient, and an electric drivetrain is 90% efficient, 85–90% efficient. So there's a bonus already. And also the solution could be charged using alternative energy, you know, not coming from a petroleum source. So Harvard University is the one that's working on the organic flow battery on those. They've come up with some of the compounds that go within the battery on those, and it's another one where they're looking at trying to get this to a commercial stage, whereby to make it commercially feasible on those. So they've developed the chemistry and the prototype and that for it. So we're seeing a lot of different ideas coming through in batteries on those at the moment, and that's where all it is. It's all in the battery development. And every month, I present a different idea on those. We had the sodium-ion battery also, as well as the lithium-ion on those. And now this is a redox battery, a reduction oxidation battery, or a flow battery. And they suit large installations and those, but it could also be scaled down for a vehicle. But if they can bring the costs down, then that's also a big game changer in that as well. So I just wanted to show that one to the group. So before we started tonight, is there any news? Any other news that people want to talk about? Any projects that they've got going, or anything that they hear coming up in the near future? Yes.
Does anybody know anything? Is that on?
Yes, it is. It's just
is anybody aware of the Nissan Leaf and the Tesla that are going around Australia at the moment? I understand they called into Melbourne quite recently.
No, I haven't heard about it. So if you could tell us something about that, that'd be good.
Well, I come from Wangaratta and I missed them, unfortunately. They've both gone past by the time I found out about it. But the Nissan Leaf guy is quite an extensive program because he has to charge every 100k or so. Whereas the Tesla, well, up the East Coast is fine because he's got all the superchargers, but he's been charging on three-phase power points at showgrounds and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And they're both travelling around Australia. Are they travelling together?
No, they're quite separate enterprises.
I suppose the Tesla could probably do longer range than that in a day, but I thought it might have been a tour together, so they're doing that separately.
No, they're doing it quite separately. One's actually a fundraiser for some medical condition. That's a Nissan Leaf.
Okay.
And the other guy's just taking his Tesla around, which I wanted to do, but he's doing it before me.
It's true. The one bit of news I did hear from Nissan on those that came through this month is Nissan have developed a home vehicle-to-grid system on those. Well, it's been available in Japan for some time, and they're now doing tests of it in England on those with Iron Energy, I think it was. So that's a development of a vehicle-to-grid system. And that will then enable power to be shared with the grid. You can then get into the wholesale market for electricity and all these issues on those that we're doing, with storage, energy storage into the grid, battery storage, or while a car has a battery in it as well. It can also be used as a vehicle to grid.
So with that, does the car run on the DC battery, or do they have it on an AC battery? Or do they have an inverter?
They have an inverter on those, so that's probably a main part of the system that Nissan's producing. So there's a box, which goes in your garage next to your car on those, and it's the vehicle to get grid transfer station and those. And you can also access the spot price on electricity on those, and if the spot, you can program it so if the spot price rises above a certain level, then your vehicle then starts feeding energy back into the grid. So that way you can enter the wholesale market. I know there are people in Australia that are starting to do that here. There's one of the Australian energy companies who I don't know who they are, but I saw it on Catalyst, and that whereby you can then run your solar system, your battery and your solar system onto the grid and decide when you want to sell power back into the grid. This has been more common in the US and in Europe, but now they're allowing companies in Australia to access the wholesale through your provider, through your energy provider, you can access the wholesale electricity market. Well, I think I'll make a start. So looking at their I don't think I see the presentation on that one. I've got another USB drive. Flow battery. Beg your pardon? Okay. Yep. Safe to take that out? Sorry. Yep. Okay, tonight we'll be comparing 4 vehicles on those, comparison on those, on looking at the energy used of each vehicle, the CO2 emissions of the vehicle on those. So with this comparison here, I've made the comparison so that they're all 5 years. So I've taken the figures and those and made them so that we can actually compare one with another. Make it a lot easier to follow. But I've looked at 4 typical vehicles: Toyota Camry, which is a typical petrol car, then the Nissan Leaf, the Model S, and then the Vectrix type scooter, which is the sort of scooters that I ride on those. So next one, looking at the cost of ownership of a Toyota Camry. So we're looking at new price here. If you're buying one new, $29,000 on those, and then the trade-in value after 5 years is $10,250. So the cost of ownership over that 5-year period is $18,750. Servicing for 5 years, $4,750. Registration. The registration is the same on all the cars. I think registration up to 2 tonnes on that car is all the same figures. So for 5 years it comes to $3,855. Tyres. And that's the total cost of ownership. I've done the fuel separately because we can look at the fuel and the energy that's to provide with a car. But these first lot of figures is just on ownership as such. No, I haven't included insurance on that, and I agree, that's a cost, isn't it, and that to it. So you'd have to look to see what the insurance and that would be. For each vehicle?
On the purchase price,
Things where you live and all that sort of thing. Every time you get a call through, you get
the vehicle is electric versus petrol, same price, would it be both?
yeah, there's no difference whether it's electric or petrol. You say, well, I'm sure I can't do petrol.
Yes.
For every year, you have to sort of ring and say, well, why are you putting it up? You ring 2.
You change it, you have to check them.
And they drop it. So it's just,
Yes, you're right. So insurance would be one of those things that you'd need to follow, and that as well is true. I suppose the Tesla Model S, with being a luxury car, would have a higher insurance premium and a more expensive car to repair. But the others would be fairly similar. Next one would be the Nissan Leaf. On those, so taking the cost of ownership there, $37,000 new. That's an estimated, this actually came from the Red Book, you know, as its trade-in valuation after 5 years. And I put $1,000 on that because they're usually a bit low, so what they offer you is a trade-in figure. It's still $18,490 for the 5 years ownership. Servicing is lower on that car when you compare it with the first one, because there's a lot less servicing and that involves an electric vehicle. Registration was the same. Tyres, $700, a little cheaper on those, $24,000. So the servicing cost has more or less offset the cost of ownership on those. Well, the Nissans come up a bit cheaper there. It's the Model S on those, so $120,000 new. Trade-in value after 5 years, I found very hard to find on those. That is a guess. I'll admit that. So we're looking maybe $45,000 worth of devaluation over the 5 years. It may be less devaluation. The trade-in value may be higher. If the vehicle is popular on the second-hand market, well, then the value, of course, goes up. Servicing, Tesla have a 4-year fixed service contract. You know, you can get a service contract for your vehicle for 4 years. So I just scaled that to 5, and to 2,375, and registration the same. The tyres were quite a bit dearer on the Tesla. On those, it uses more expensive tyres, and people have been going through tyres a lot faster than they have with other vehicles, especially the rear tyres. So I just seem to notice that. So $1,800 in that in tyres. Some people have been complaining that their tyre cost has been higher than their electricity cost, you know, when you compare the two together, because they don't really use a lot of electricity, but they do use tyres. The Vectrix VX1, if you want to go to a scooter, electric scooter on those, then the figures, of course, are a lot lower. That 12,995, well, the vehicles aren't available new anymore on those, so that's really an arbitrary figure. But the scooters have devalued a lot on those. After 5 years, they're really only worth $4,000, so it's a fair devaluation. Servicing on these in 5 years, one of these scooters requires 2 rear tyres, 1 front tyre, and the brake fluid to be changed on those, and that's the only servicing in 5 years. Registration is a bit lower, but motorcycles aren't necessarily all that much cheaper to register than cars. They're a bit lower because of the insurance costs and that of them. Got tyres, total of $11,000 there. Now this is where we can start to compare, where it becomes more interesting, when we compare the fuel and the energy costs on those for those cars. These figures are based on 15,000 kilometres a year over 5 years. So the Toyota Camry would use $7,000, $7,500 worth of fuel. The Nissan Leaf. Now, in working out these electricity costs, I've actually worked them out at 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So I've done an average there on those. You'd probably be charging them off peak most of the time on those if you didn't have a solar system. On those, if you own this car and you had the car only, you'd probably be charging an off peak, which is around 16 cents a kilowatt hour. If you've got a solar system, the dynamic will change, of course, and we're going to go into that further in the presentation. But that's been based on 16 cents a kilowatt hour. And then the Tesla Model S, even though it's a much larger car, doesn't use a lot more electricity. So it's very efficient on those and how it runs. And then the scooter, of course, well, its electricity cost is quite low on those. About $100 a year in electricity to run it. Comparing CO2 emissions. Got a fair bit of research here to try and find the figures in that on these vehicles, on those. The Toyota Camry was pretty straightforward on those to work out its CO2 emissions from its exhaust. But then for the Nissan Leaf and the electric ones, I was looking at, well, they're going to be running from electricity on those. So what's the CO2 emissions involved in generating that electricity? So I based that on figures on that from Victoria on those, and also considering that the vehicles will probably be charged off peak on those, which is a time when the power stations are running idle, so it's excess energy. On those, they need to sort of shed that energy overnight. So it really depends on the time when you charge it as well. This is an estimate that I've put in for those figures. So the Nissan Leaf there's come up at 6, Tesla at 7, and the scooter at very little. So 1 metric tonne of those is CO2 from its electricity consumed. But it just gives you an idea that the CO2 emissions on the electric vehicle came up lower than the petrol vehicle, even when you're running it on grid electricity, which some of it is coal and some of it's not. Now, adding solar into the mix on those. First thing I wanted to do, before we combine the solar with the car, I wanted to have a look at solar and just look at solar on its own and saying, well, what does solar do? If you have a solar system, what would the solar system do? So you can have a 3 or 5 kilowatt system. I've done a comparison of the two. System costs $3,500. It's pretty average on these days. There's some that are less. Now working on the figures, the 10.9 kilowatt hours per day has been taken from one of the Commonwealth sites on what would be available for Melbourne. So that is an estimate of how much electricity on an annual average period that you would get off that solar system on those, for Melbourne. It's a Melbourne figure. So if you multiply that out, that's 19,000 kilowatt hours over 5 years. On those, on its average, that would reduce, extended over a 5-year period. And at my cost that I've worked out there, I've worked out it's 16 cents a kilowatt hour. If we're replacing electricity we're drawing from the grid for the car, that's about $3,000 worth of electricity. So with the solar system, we're looking at a payback period of just over 5 years on the solar system, using these figures. And then the 5 kilowatt system came out similar through there, though producing more electricity. It's also just over a 5-year payback period. Now with these vehicles going from a 5-year now to a daily, so that we can do a more comparison with the solar system. 15,000 kilometres a year is 41 kilometres a day. So this is the daily energy use on those 4 vehicles. So we can see the Camry's 3 times the cost, which is pretty much on 3 times the cost of the others, of the Leaf anyway, nearly 3 times on those, and the Model S a little higher, and the Vectrix down below. Now, this is coming more down to experience and what we've found with home solar systems. You know, you can buy a 3 kilowatt home solar system, but it's not going to produce 3 kilowatts for a long period of time every day on those. And if you want to charge your electric vehicle during the daytime, you have to have enough power coming out of the solar system to work the charger on the vehicle on those. Otherwise, you're just going to be starting to use energy from the grid as well to top up in what it's doing here. So I've got a 3 kilowatt system on my house, and my Vectrix draws 1.8 kilowatts. The charge is an 1800 watt charger and that in it. And I find that I can charge that on most days. There are days when I cannot charge it on those during the day, and I might have to wait a day or two to charge it or charge it at night. But to practically charge the vehicle, you have to have enough energy coming from the solar system to be able to operate the charger. And luckily, with many of the electric cars, you can adjust, you can set your charging rate on those. It's quite often available as an option. So you then have to set the charging rate on what you're doing it. But practically, to charge a vehicle of 1.8 kilowatts regularly, you really need a 3 kilowatt system on those. And then working out at 1 kilowatts, 5 hours of charging comes to 9 kilowatts, 9 kilowatt hours. Which then is the same figures that I produced for, it's about $3,000 worth of electricity. And then with a 5 kilowatt system there, on those you can charge probably a Nissan Leaf that charges at 3.6 kilowatts on those. 33,000 kilowatt hours over a 5-year period. Now, we're also talking about home battery storage, and that through there. So if you add home battery storage to the mix on those, it changes it totally. So I did some research on what home battery storage systems are available in Melbourne and Australia on those, and these were the main ones that came up on those. There was still 4 or 5 other ones that are available on the market to do there. Now, first of all, I might go to the Tesla Powerwall first of all, because this is the one that people have been commenting about, and those the interest in. On those, looking around, I couldn't find anyone who put a Powerwall in which was a new system, without having to do an upgrade on those as such. So I was looking for a price of what would a Powerwall be in Australia on those to purchase here. and there was none available on the web. You'd have to approach the installer on those to find a price and as such. And all of the installations that I found that had been done with the Powerwall were new installations where a suitable inverter had to be used on those on the Powerwall system. On those, I haven't found a single one yet where a Powerwall was added to an existing system on those, the battery system, and that it was compatible and able to be used. But so I found quotes of between $12,000 and $15,000, and that was typical of, I found several quotes as such, what people had paid for their installations, because inverter was involved with it. And this particular quote was the lowest at $12,000, and it came from Choice. Choice have done an article on the Powerwall and installation and payback time, quite a good analysis of it. So that'd be a good article to go and have a look at, you know, if you're interested in the Powerwall and that as such. Then we have AGL is selling the SunVerge system on those. These systems here, inverter is included. On those, there's the two systems available through there, fairly large, 11.6 and 19.4 kilowatt hour systems on those, so they'll be able to shift quite a bit of energy in that into the afternoon and evening as such. Inverter is included so that the system can be used as a standalone. So if the power goes off, you're off the grid. On those, you can actually use these, the top three systems, the Samsung and the Panasonic, can be used as a backup for your house on those and run your house during an outage time period. And then you can then switch back to operating as a grid interactive inverter as well. So then there was the Samsung one on those, 11,000. Panasonic have an 8 kilowatt hour system on those that's advertised, but I couldn't find any pricing information on it at all, what people have paid. With these pricings and that too, I went on to the Whirlpool forum, which has got a lot of information on those of what people have actually done, you know, with installations. Like with these prices, I went to the main manufacturer's sites and to reputable retailer sites first. And then after going and having a look at Whirlpool and seeing what people have actually experienced on installations and those, but I still couldn't find a price for the Panasonic. So the conclusions that I made through there, the amount of savings from solar depends on daylight use of the system on those. So when you're using a solar system, and those, if you can use it during the daytime, on those you're obviously using your own energy. On those you're not exporting to the grid. It's 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And so you can offset the CO2 of your vehicle. You can offset the cost of the electricity by charging during the daytime. Of course, as long as your solar system is able to produce enough energy to charge the vehicle on that day. On those, so you can run anything up to, you could offset up to 100% of your energy and your CO2 by continually charging through the day. But not everyone is home during the day. So this is the conundrum there on charging an electric vehicle. And of course, if you have battery storage, then that charging time can be extended into the evening or into the night, because the battery can be charged from the system during the day on those, and then that energy can be used later. It can be used in the evening on those when you're still running peak period on those up to 11 o'clock at night. So the evening peak is an important part of where battery storage systems will come in. If you don't have an electric vehicle, well then the evening peak is when you're going to use your battery storage on those to mitigate that high feed-in tariff in the evening as you're approaching 11 o'clock. But, and another basic thing we found, of course, is you require a 5 kilowatt or larger solar system if you want to charge your car on those. Practically, that is the case. On those, you can charge your car with a smaller solar system during the day, but you're quite likely to be draining energy off the grid, and that as well to meet the charging requirements of the vehicle. So you're really looking at a 5 kilowatt system, that is your minimum. And then the payback times like we've seen at the moment. Solar system, 5 to 7 years. Home storage with a battery is still looking at a 10 to 15 year payback period. There is one case in Queensland where someone put in a Samsung system and they quoted a 7.5 year payback period on those. That came up in one of my searches on those, but it was quite surprising. It did seem unrealistic on those. We're looking at the payback period as 10 to 15 years. So that's what the figures come to.
Payback includes the savings on petrol?
Yes, on those. Well, no, it includes the energy offset like the electricity. So the petrol car it doesn't apply to, but it's costed actually on the electric vehicles, on those. So as we saw, the electric vehicles were actually using a lot less energy than the Camry.
That should be an additional saving. Difference between the petrol and the electric car. You could add that benefit.
Yes.
Total system benefit.
Yes, yes, I think you're right there. I think I agree with you too there, isn't it? Because you have the electric car, so you don't have your petrol cost on those, and then the additional of the solar and battery system on those will then offset that final saving that as well. So yeah, so that would, if you had an electric car and the solar system, yes, it would reduce the payback period down as well. It's true.
Petrol cars don't have a payback period.
No, they don't. Very true. I suppose if you've got a system that can generate energy, then you're looking at a payback period, aren't you? Yeah.
You've got a total package that includes the car and the PV and the battery, and it has a payback period. Well, you're well in front.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. Very true. Any other questions? Does anyone want to make any comments? Yep. Maybe you want to start.
Just one comment about the resale value of the electric vehicles.
Okay.
I'd guess there's a bit of uncertainty around those numbers, given that battery deterioration after 5 years is a bit of an unknown with some of these, I'm guessing.
Yes. Well, we've had electric vehicles around for some time now on those, like the Nissan Leafs were available in 2010. And those, so we've seen them for some time. So we're looking at battery lives, yeah, of 10 to 12 years. Well, over 10 years and that at this stage. So in the 5-year ownership of a vehicle on those, the battery life doesn't necessarily come into account. It's probably too short a period of time.
Just a comment on vehicle to your home charging.
Yes.
I'm Mitsubishi, and Mitsubishi refused to supply me with one of their charging systems which allows vehicle to the home. They sell them in America and Japan, but not here. And that would make a tremendous difference to owning an electric car. And Elon Musk, the man behind Tesla, just as an aside, in one of his discussions said he didn't think they would ever have the Model S as a home storage unit, which is a bit sad because it would run my house for 10 days.
Yes, that's true. Isn't it? I suppose Nissan also had released the vehicle to home system in Japan on those, but no, probably not seeing them here and that as much. I think partly Elon also is talking that the vehicle's often not at home on those, so he felt that it had less of a benefit because the vehicle wouldn't be at home a lot of the time. But that's probably dependent upon the person and upon where the vehicle is, isn't it? And that at the time.
Well, that's very true. I used to do about 18,000 kilometres until I got my Tesla. Now I've done 41,000 in the Tesla in just over 12 months. So it encourages you to drive a lot more.
Okay.
And just a comment on the tyres. There are two wheel sizes in the Tesla, the 21-inch and the 19-inch. I got the 19-inch because I couldn't afford the bigger ones, but it turns out that, well, my tyres have done 41,000 on the small wheels, and they've got an awful lot of life left in them yet.
Good.
Whereas I understand a lot of people with larger wheels have had to change them after 20,000. They're more a racing tyre, the ones on the bigger wheels.
Yes, I suppose they're a lower profile tyre and probably a softer compound tyre as well. Yeah, so it sounds like you've got the more practical tyres on those that are probably more energy efficient on those, like a lower rolling resistance and also a longer lasting tyre. Yeah, that's good. So at least you do have an option of a lower cost on the tyres, yeah, with the Tesla. Any other questions?
If they're not supplying the vehicles with equipment, is it possible to make one yourself? It's just an inverter, surely.
Yes, I think it probably would be possible to make one yourself on those. So like there are battery to grid systems available in Australia which are used with solar. So that would be a good starting point, isn't it? You know, which is basically the same system. And those, so because it's really just a battery in a vehicle. So yes, I'm sure that it could be made. That is something that could be made in that. The I know that the Nissan one that they have uses the CHAdeMO point on those, a fast charge point on the car on those, but that's probably the only details I know about it on those. And one of the English power companies is doing a trial and that on them. They've put 40, 60 car into the market, and they're just doing a trial on that on them. So yes, it would be possible in that to do that.
I can support that. There's I'm part of the technical advisory group, electrode technology, all the licensed electricians that all talk about, you know, the fear and risk around batteries and hoverboards exploding, and it's just quite amazing some of the talk that goes on, and this is a committee that's looking at home energy storage batteries. No surprise, and there's two vocational units of competency that haven't been endorsed by what was then EEOS, the Skills Council, and yeah, they're talking to me about, you know, these two vocational units of competency. One is designing battery storage for the home, and the other is installation of battery storage. But one of the interesting things they said, because they know that I've been involved in developing the hybrid electric units of competency, is putting a DC to AC inverter in a car. In other words, putting an extra in the back of the car, the boot typically, a DC to AC inverter, so you can then feed. Now, someone even suggested if your workplace has a plug-in charger for your electric vehicle, that you charge the vehicle at work, but don't tell anyone, and then come home and shift that energy into your house. So there's lots of, yeah, it's called theft.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Not in that case. No.
Well, they're like something for the brain. Let's do something on this.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to. Yep, but look, I'm a. Yeah, there's some challenges ahead, but I think the challenge that I see is that people like probably us in the room. I don't know how many licensed electricians have we got in this group. Hands up. Okay, so there's one. I find it, you know, I've been restricted really doing the sort of thing I want to do because I'm not a licensed electrician, and I'd need to partner with one to put in home energy storage. So I'm an early adopter. I put a SunGrow, 5 kilowatt SunGrow, standalone inverter, and I've got LG Chem, cost me $7,000. But I'm already seeing the benefits. But where I'm seeing a benefit too is my hot water. I've got a hot water heat pump. So during the day, I'm using a fair bit of that solar to heat my hot water. And then once that's done, then it charges the LG Chem battery.
Okay.
But I haven't got an electric vehicle yet. That's the next move.
Okay.
Yeah,
in the future, you could have the car and the home battery.
Here we are. We'll go.
You could have a dual battery system, and you could have a computer control that switches. You'd have set up your protocols, and you could decide which one's being charged and which one, when the sun is shining, which one is being charged, which depending on your priorities. And then when you're using power, again, depending on your priorities, you could decide which battery you draw power from.
That's true, isn't it? I think the software development is going to be an enormous part of this as well. You know, we quite often talk about batteries and the inverter systems and that, but then also there's the software and that to run it on those, and probably to be able to control the system that yourself, like an app on a phone and that, for instance. You know, because you may need to know what the weather's going to be tomorrow on those, and you know, will I get a chance to charge my car? You know, how much solar input am I going to get tomorrow, and things like that, because it'll vary from day to day. So I reckon the flexibility of the software and that's very important.
And when you plan to have trips, some days you'll sit at home, and other days you know you're going to do travelling, so it won't be present, and it also you'll need to have a charge.
Yes, that's true, isn't it? So on those, it takes, with a bit of forward planning and the software that's able to manage that on those, yeah, you can decide, you know, you can plan ahead of what energy source, what energy you're going to need for that next day or next few days, and that to it. And so how much energy also input is going to come in from the weather on those, and then that on the system and that as well. Well, I think it'll be a continuing development on those, like a lot of these things. As we're starting to see the solar systems that come into the houses, and people starting to use battery systems, and even the cars are really only just starting to become available on those. Like, I mean, I own a Vectrix scooter, which I've ridden for 3 or 4 years, and those, and we had to repair and modify that before the vehicle that could be used, because the ones that came out of the ones that were imported into Australia all were faulty on those, and we got them going. But oh well, I think it's all coming along, and then as the battery technology improves and the cost of batteries come down, we'll see a lot more available and that to do it. Oh, well, thanks for coming tonight on those. I think we might go and have a cuppa something and have a bit of a chat on those for that. Is any other comments or anything else that people wanted to say?
One thing I'd like to question, you talk about the energy costs of these vehicles. But the Camry and the Model S accommodate 5 people each. The Leaf, I think, goes 4. And the June goes 1.
1 or 2. 1, yeah.
And that's not reflected in the energy costs.
No, well, that's true. Well, with a vehicle on those, a lot of the time there's only one person in it. So I'm going to make that comment on that as well. Those, but yes, the Tesla Model S is quite an efficient vehicle on those for the size of what it is. And another comment, of course, I made on my energy costs is I worked it out on 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So I just had to have some standard and then on what I needed to do.
Realising, of course, that the Tesla superchargers are free.
Yes.
You don't have to. I suppose most people realise that there are superchargers at Richmond, Euroa, right through to Port Macquarie, and the power is free. It's well, when I say free, it's built into the cost of the car that you put.
Well, yeah. Yes, it is, isn't it? That's very true. So if you want to travel long distances and that as such, you've got access to that supercharged network on those, and it's included. It's free, isn't it? No extra cost in that for it.
I'd say of the 41,000 kilometres I've done, most of that would be on free electricity.
Mm-hmm.
At least 95% of it.
So when we were talking about the vehicles on those, the actual energy cost up part of the vehicle is not particularly high. When you say and looking at the vehicle cost of ownership on those, and servicing and maintenance and that of the vehicle. So yes, it is good to have access to the free energy, but the energy cost is still fairly low. I suppose it's only when we go up to petrol, when we're looking at a petrol vehicle, we start to realise what the true energy cost is knows for what a lot of other people pay.
I'm not actually flogging Teslas. I might sound like it sometimes.
Well, you're experienced with them, so you know them, yeah.
The other thing, you could take out that service contract, but I've been advised by Tesla that it doesn't have to be serviced.
Okay.
And I'm working on that basis that my service costs will be free.
Mm.
And I'll have to replace tyres and windscreen wipers. It's most unlikely I'll replace brake discs or anything. Because,
No. Have they given you a service routine for the car? Do you know what servicing should be done over 5 years?
no, they've actually said it doesn't require servicing.
No. No, I know they have filters that have a scheduled replacement on them. There's an air filter, I think that has a scheduled replacement. And also the brakes would also need to be, the brake fluid should be
Very
changed.
much of the brake will ever have to be serviced because of regenerative braking.
Oh, it's actually the fluid on those in it, over a period of time.
Yes.
With cars, they quote 60,000 kilometres. You should change the brake fluid in a car.
Yes, I understand that.
Or in a petrol car.
That's mainly because of moisture absorption.
Yes.
And again, if you have a look at the brakes on the Tesla, you wouldn't be too worried about having a bit of water in the fluid.
No, but the fluid should be changed.
Got the electrical braking and the
yes, you would still have braking anyway on those for it, but as fluid gets into as moisture gets into the fluid, it'll cause corrosion in the braking system on those. So fluid should be changed at some stage. Yep. It's a matter of working out, what's the correct period of time, isn't it, to do it? So.
You've got Toyota Camry there on the previous page. It's Toyota Camry hybrid. So it's a hybrid we're talking about.
No, it's the non-hybrid on those. So it may have too, because I originally based this on the hybrid on those, and then I found I got better figures when I used the traditional Camry. So I did a little change there. I changed it partway through I wonder which one I left the hybrid on. These figures are not on the hybrid. Oh, here we are. Look, here it is. So it is on one of them. On those. No, these figures are not on the hybrid. The hybrid is actually 20%, 25% better with petrol. Yeah, I think the Camry hybrid's a lovely car, actually. Oh no, it's probably one of the best of the hybrid cars. The Camry hybrid's very practical on those, but no, I did. I changed it because it gave me better figures than that in this presentation. It's not the hybrid. The figures I've worked out at. The hybrid was 25%, around 25% better, both in CO2 and in petrol consumption on those, and it was also a little bit more expensive to buy. It had a higher purchase price. It's only $3,000, I think, but it was a little bit dearer to buy. Right?
Just a matter of interest. I've had a quote for a Tesla Powerwall with a 5 kilowatt system and 3-phase for charging the Tesla, and that was $16,000.
Okay. Okay.
3-phase add a lot for that, you know?
No, I don't think it added much at all.
Was that including panels, or you already have the panels? With the panels as well?
That was providing the full system.
Okay.
I have 9.5 kilowatts on this particular place, but it was worth putting in another 5 for that.
Oh, I see. Oh, so that's not so bad. That includes 5 kilowatts of solar as well. Yeah.
Well, just, you mentioned on your slides for an electric vehicle,
Okay.
That's true. I mean, days like today, if today's an example of not a real good day for charging my LG Chem batteries, I think they only got about 5 or 8%, state of charge.
Oh, okay.
Because there was hardly any sun in Melbourne. So one of the things that I've, looked at is Melbourne for 3 months of the year is probably not really going to be great to be charging your electric vehicle from battery storage. You're going to be using quite a bit of power from the grid. but you do it, you know, at the shoulder or the
Off-peak,
off-peak. Yeah. But yeah, 5 kilowatts in 9 months of the year. I'm quite happy about that. But I haven't got the electric vehicle yet, so I'm waiting for prices to drop.
Yeah, for something suitable to become available. Okay.
Do you have any information on possible factory upgrade?
No more information than what had been released on those. So there was a range. The range figures are quoted on the internet, like the increase in range in the i3, but no specific details of the cost or how you could have it done. Have you approached BMW? No, we haven't heard anything from with them yet. I haven't had anyone approach them yet. Okay.
Did you include the cost of money in that?
No, I haven't included any interest.
Because that would rock.
Okay. Because of its high purchase price?
Yes.
Well, yes, it would, wouldn't it? On those.
Also, the Leaf was fairly expensive beast.
It was, wasn't it? It was 39,000, I think, on that for a Leaf, 37, 39,000. So yes, I suppose the more expensive cars, isn't it? Then you're investing that money. You're losing it in this interest. But no, I didn't include it. I probably wanted to make the presentation as simple as possible on those, and that's probably why I left the insurance out as well. So just so that I could compare, you know, apples with apples.
Where is that lovely town?
I'll have to ask Adrian that. It's on his laptop. No.
Oh, that's right.
Looks like Southern Europe somewhere. Yeah. Okay. All that quits now. Yep.